In the late 19th century, Texas went through a massive transformation. I mean, it went from this sprawling, violent, and pretty much untamed frontier to the beginnings of the modern state we know today. But here's the thing, this wasn't some gentle evolution. Oh no, it was a brutal, rapid conquest waged with six-shooters, steel plows, and railroad iron. So let's get into this dramatic story of how modern Texas was really forged. You know, this old cowboy expression from the 1880s really gets to the heart of it. A country where a man can switch his tail. It paints a picture of this wide, open land, a place of just immense freedom, where there are no fences and the only boundary is the horizon. But that very openness, well, that also made it a place of constant, simmering conflict. All right, to really get a handle on this transformation, we have to go back to the time right after the Civil War, because Texas, in a lot of ways, was a broken land. The state was barely populated, its defenses were weak, and its future totally unwritten. I mean, the scale of the collapse was just staggering. During the Civil War, with all the troops gone, the frontier basically just dissolved. Settlers who had pushed west were forced to retreat, and fast. Get this, in Tarrant County, where Fort Worth stands today, the population just plummeted from 6,000 people to only 1,000. The land pretty much descended into chaos, becoming this contested ground between Anglo settlers and the powerful Native American tribes of the plains. And all that chaos and vulnerability? Well, it set the stage for the central conflict of the era, a brutal, all-out war for control of the land itself. So here we have the two main forces in that fight. On one side, you've got the powerful Comanche and Kiowa tribes, led by figures like the brilliant warrior Quanah Parker. And on the other, you've got the Anglo settlers represented by the U.S. Army and the legendary and, let's be honest, often ruthless Texas Rangers. This quote from a Comanche chief, man, it just says it all, doesn't it? It gets right to the heart of the conflict from the Native American perspective. See, this wasn't just a war over territory. It was a clash between two totally incompatible ways of life. One was nomadic, completely dependent on the vast herds of buffalo. The other was sedentary, determined to fence the land and change it forever. And if you want to see that clash in one single shocking statistic, look at this. The near-total extermination of the buffalo wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate military strategy. General Sherman himself called the herds the Indian commissary. The thinking was, if you destroy their main source of food, shelter, and tools, you make the Plains tribes dependent and totally unable to resist. The end came quickly, and it was brutal. The army chased the tribes relentlessly, even into their winter camps where they were most vulnerable. The knockout blow came at Palo Duro Canyon. Soldiers captured the Comanches' entire horse herd, we're talking over 1,000 animals, and shot them, leaving the tribe stranded on the prairie. After a long winter of starvation, Quanah Parker surrendered in June of 1875. And just like that, the Plains Wars were over. Okay, so with the Indian Wars over, the job of keeping order, well, that fell to the Texas Rangers. And there's this classic story that just perfectly captures their whole vibe. Ranger John Armstrong tracked the infamous killer John Wesley Hardin all the way to a train in Florida. The story goes that Hardin saw Armstrong's Colt revolver and just yelled, "Texas, by God," right before he was knocked out and captured. It was that kind of violent, decisive action that really cemented their fearsome reputation. So, the land is now cleared of both Native Americans and outlaws. But the conquest of Texas wasn't over, not by a long shot. It just shifted from a human conflict to a technological one, the battle to tame the landscape itself. This image, it just captures that golden age that came next, the rise of the great Texas cattle kingdom. You had guys like Charles Goodnight and Richard King building these massive empires on the now empty plains, driving millions of longhorns north to the railroads. Ranches like the King Ranch grew to be over 1 million acres. It was the era of the cowboy, a brief, romantic, and incredibly profitable moment in time. But this entire world, the world of the open range and the long cattle drive, it all came to a sudden, screeching halt. And it was all because of one simple, spiky little invention. Joseph Glidden's barbed wire, patented in 1874, was the technology that finally conquered the treeless prairie where wooden fences were just impossible to build. And the end came in such a dramatic rush. First, a clever salesman named John W. Gates put on a public spectacle in San Antonio to prove the wire could hold back ferocious longhorns. It worked. Suddenly, everyone was fencing everything. This led to violent fence-cutting wars as people's access to water and grass got blocked. Then came the final blow, a series of brutal winters. Cattle, drifting south to escape the blizzards, piled up against these new fence lines and froze to death by the thousands. Up to 85% of some herds were wiped out. And with that, the open range was finished, forever. But barbed wire wasn't working alone. It had a partner in crime, so to speak, the windmill. This was the tech that allowed settlers to tap into underground water, making life possible far from any rivers or streams. Together, barbed wire and the windmill empowered farmers, they called them nesters, to move in and carve up the great ranches into homesteads. You know, when you fence in an entire state, it doesn't just change the landscape, it triggers a huge shift in the economy. The cattle kingdom gave way to a brand new king, King Cotton. The explosion in cotton production was just unbelievable. In just 20 years, it increased more than 7 times over. By 1880, Texas became the #1 cotton-producing state in the entire country. This new farm economy tied Texas directly to the industrial markets of the North, and really, the whole world. So how did all this cotton get to market? Well, the arteries of this new economy were the railroads. They crisscrossed the state, carrying cotton and East Texas lumber out to national markets and bringing manufactured goods back in. The independent, isolated Texas of the past was disappearing, and fast. Okay, so let's put it all together. The wars are over, the land is fenced, a new economy is booming. All of this leads to the final act in this transformation, the decline of the frontier and the birth of modern urban Texas. And then you start to see the symbols of a permanent, civilized society popping up all over the place. These weren't just buildings. They were anchors for a new identity. Major universities like Texas A&M and the University of Texas were founded. Influential newspapers got their start. And in 1888, the massive new Granite State Capitol opened in Austin, a bold statement about the state's ambitions and its future. But just as Texas seemed to be stepping into this new, more orderly century, Mother Nature delivered a terrifying reminder of who was really in charge. In September of 1900, a massive hurricane slammed into Galveston, which at the time was the state's most sophisticated and important city. The storm was, well, it's hard to even put into words, an almost unimaginable catastrophe. An estimated 6,000 people were killed, making it the deadliest natural disaster in American history, even to this day. The city was just leveled, and its future as the state's premier port was gone in an instant. And yet, what happened next is just so Texas. In the aftermath, they responded with that same defiant drive to impose order that had defined the last few decades. The people of Galveston built a massive seawall and physically raised the level of the entire city, a monumental feat of engineering. It's such a powerful symbol of humanity's will to tame a hostile environment, a fitting end to an era defined by that very struggle. And so there it is. By the turn of the 20th century, the transformation was complete. In just over 30 years, the wild, open Texas of cowboys and Comanche had vanished. The native tribes were on reservations, the buffalo were gone, the open range was fenced, and the state was industrializing. The Texas frontier was officially closed. The physical frontier was gone, yeah? But the question that lingers, the one that really sticks with you, is this. How did the myths born in this violent, transformative era, myths of the cowboy, the ranger, the rugged individual, how did they continue to shape the identity and the politics of Texas for the next 100 years and right up to today?